welcome, and I'd like to introduce my friend and
Cousin.
That was a teaser. We found out we have a relationship. So anyway, Cindy joined in 2022, joined the Daughters, and I found out that one of her indirect ancestors came on my wagon train. So I said, hey, that's cool, yeah.
That started
You want to tell the
everything.
embarrassing thing that I said?
Yes, so I started doing my research with Sherry, and I had all the dates and the diaries, and I had everything I needed. Well, it turns out that I had a lot of ancestors, the gals before me, Jackie Caples, Barbara Caples Peoples, there was Garnet Caples. They already had been pioneer daughters. I didn't need to do all that information. They told me afterwards.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the story goes that I was talking to Pepper, and she says, you're not going to believe this, but you've got the wrong date. You didn't come in 1852. You came in 1844, and I had my stuff in front of me, and I said, no way. And I said, are you sure? And she goes, well, you've got the date wrong, Cindy. It's going to be all right. We'll fix it. Well, we found out there were two sets of Caples that came. First set, Joseph Caples, that we'll introduce. And he was a cousin of my Caples' great-great-grandfather, Henry.
Yeah, so that was the first kid.
Phew.
So I started with if you're into researching history, these things happen, but it sure was embarrassing. I was just so excited. Oh, you're wrong, okay. So
Small
we
room.
were both right in a way. And you'll learn from this presentation. Okay, so Henry Lawfer Caples family Oregon Trail journey, guess what? 1852.
I told you.
Okay. So before 1852, there was a Caples Oregon Trail influencer, to use a current term. I just thought, okay, I have to use it.
It was.
It applies.
And his name is Joseph S. Caples, 1844 pioneer. He was a cousin of my second great-grandfather, Henry Lawfer Caples. And his younger brother, John Fletcher Caples, Joseph encouraged Henry to join him in the Oregon Territory. So he was the influencer.
Yes. So Joseph was 40 years old on the trail. He was married to Mary Ann Lawfer. Lawfer name comes in her line too. So no Lawfer about it. So anyway, she was 31 years old. There was a 12-year-old Charles Green Caples, who you will hear that name a lot. He became a doctor. Hezekiah, love that name. He was 10. You'll hear that about him too later. And Joanna Lawfer Caples was 9. So, and they came with my ancestors, Alexander Hamilton McQuinn, Rebecca Enyer McQuinn, and Sarah Stevens Enyer are my direct ancestors on the same wagon train in 1844. How cool is that? So my ancestors knew, actually more. We'll find out more. But anyway, so that was the start of this whole thing. So 1852 was an interesting year.
It was a peak year of Oregon Trail. 70,000 people traveled either to Oregon, California, or Utah. Women first wore bloomers for the ease of travels on the Oregon Trail. Back east, bloomers were seen as radical suffragist symbols.
Woo. Woo-hoo. Anyway. So this is a map, and I just put some important things, like of course the Continental Divide, and we have from Caples Landing, May 15, 1852. Here's something, see, you're going to hear this a lot. Research continues.
Yes, we're still researching.
Yes, so you can explain about Sydney, Iowa, or?
Yeah, so the Henry Lawfer Caples and his wife Margaret, they got together with the grandmother Caples' sister. So an aunt and an uncle came along with them. And I think out of convenience, they all met in Sydney to come out west. They all talked to each other and they voted.
Yes. But what I found out is in my genealogy, we left from Caples Landing. It's in my genealogy book. And it wasn't until Cindy and I got together, I was like, wait a minute, there's a Caples anyway, so it wasn't Caples Landing. Some genealogist somewhere put an R in there. And so I found Caples Landing because I couldn't find Caples Landing in Missouri. It's Caples. So our train left from Caples, and this is what we're trying to puzzle out. Because Sydney, Iowa is a bit farther up north and east from the Missouri River. So Caples Landing is right there. It's lesser known, obviously, than Independence or St. Joseph, but it's in the, just a little due north of that. But my wagon train left from Caples Landing, and they went straight across. You could see, maybe, that if you go, that mine went straight across and joined the trail. So due west and joined the trail. Well, they tried. And they ran into a dead end. Those cul-de-sacs that you get into and you get lost and kick. It was kind of like that. And so my train actually ended up getting to Oregon in December 31st. It was the first of many mistakes. So they had to backtrack. So we're thinking maybe the word got around that Caples Landing maybe wasn't such a great spot to start from.
That's what we're thinking.
Yeah, lessons learned. Okay, so anyway, but it would have been so cool to say Caples Landing, Missouri to Caples Landing, Washington. It would have just been so cool, bookends, but it didn't, we're not sure. But we're having fun. Okay, so Caples family members on the 1852 wagon train.
So there's great-great-grandfather Henry Loffer. He was 28 years old. Margaret was 23. They were married in 1844 in Tiffin, Ohio. They, along with their two children, Robert Caples was 2.5 and Henry Rush was 6 months old. They ended up having 10 children, so these were just the first couple they had when they set out for the Oregon Trail.
That's enough.
Yeah, that was plenty.
Imagine a toddler and a baby on the trail.
Yeah.
We.
They didn't eat much.
Yeah.
So they had 16 wagons when they started out. They had at least 32 oxen, maybe more, and then a number of loose stock is what is in the diary.
So, before they started out in the trail, in February of 1852, our friend Hiram Smith, remember that name, little foreshadowing, an acquaintance in Tiffin, Ohio, spurred the family's interest in heading west.
Yes, in February of 1852, Hiram sent his brother Isaac to Sydney to borrow $500 for the purpose of outfitting their families to go west. It was Hiram, Isaac, Mr. McLaughlin, and 3 young men, Dorsey, Bayal, and Tubbs, all of Weston, Missouri. The $500 note was drawn payable upon arrival in Portland.
So,
This was the incentive which started Mr. Caples' Western fever. After consultation, it was decided, that's when they all decided that Uncle Philip and his wife Polly would join them.
So May 15, 1852 was the start of the Caples Oregon Trail journey. They left supposedly Sydney, Iowa, or maybe the Caples Landing. Anything more on that? No. So May 16th, they reach Platteville, Missouri, and Henry was chosen captain.
He was named captain of the wagon train that first night.
Yeah. So this was Oto territory, and the Otos.
Oh, we forgot one thing.
What?
That was the same night that Margaret Caples fed the family, tucked the children into the wagon,
Oh yeah.
and by the flickering campfire, she began her journal.
Yes. Which this is our primary resource document. So, there's actually a couple of different versions,
Revisions.
sort of revisions, but we didn't have any other, diaries that we know of to follow. So that's why we don't have exact dates. I think she was too busy with a toddler and a
Yeah,
baby. Okay, so, so we're back to, May 16, we're in Oto territory?
Yes. So on day 2, we passed through the Oto Indian Territory. One of the Indians, finely dressed Indian, introduced himself as he was a government agent. He said, in order to pass through safely through the Oto territory, you'll need to pay us 25 cents per wagon. Captain Caples had to make a decision that very first day that he was captain, and he doubted very seriously this guy was a genuine government agent. And the guy told him, you might want to be careful, you might get attacked as you're going through if you don't pay. And Captain Caples sent him away and said, we'll take our chances. And they got through with no incident.
So probably in early June, just past Fort Kearny, they had some Illinois immigrants join the train, and they stayed till the end, and their captain, Isaac Eaton, was an able assistant to Henry.
Yeah, yes.
So, and then after Fort Kearny, some Pawnees came in war paint and feathers and approached the camp. So what was that all about?
Okay, so the Indians dressed in war paints and feathers approached our camp very excited to see us. We fed them and could not understand their language, so we weren't sure what they wanted. After feeding them and sending them away, they later found out that the Pawnee and the Cheyenne had been in a bloody battle, and the Pawnee were looking for protection from the Caples wagon. That's what they wanted.
So in late June, at the Platte River South Fork, they lost the wagon.
Actually, there was a large wagon and their smaller wagon. The large wagon was for the bedrolls and the kids and everyone to sleep in. And a second wagon was a smaller wagon where they had all their provisions piled high with a young lad of 15 years old on top of the second small wagon. Well, so he was perched on top of the smaller wagon. All of a sudden, in the middle of the river, we hit a strong current. The bed of our wagon was carried downstream, the smaller wagon with the little guy on it. Father and young Dave Stewart swam downstream a quarter of a mile to retrieve the small wagon and towed it back to shore. The damages out from all of that was that Margaret's books and precious mementos were destroyed in the water from her wagon, but everything else was fine.
So,
Yes, how about the boy?
Oh, the boy was fine. No, everything else was fine. He's still hanging on.
a dog?
well, we were making sure you were listening. Okay, so July 2, they reach Independence Rock, and a lot of people in this group know that the target date for Independence Rock is July 4. So they are 2 days early. That's really good time. Mine were like a month and a half late.
Ooh, that's
Right?
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of comparing. Whoa.
We got there 2 days early.
Yeah, 2 days early. Hey? So, and I got this great picture from 1870. Not that of Independence Rock. And it's an old photograph. Woo! How cool is that?
I love that.
Yeah. So I was thrilled to find that.
So at Independence Rock, when Grandpa Caples went up to the top to carve our family names in there, he also made a note that he saw from the year prior, 1851, Louisa Denny, Mary Lowe, Olive Bell, all children of the founders of Seattle.
Yeah. Now, how he knew that at the time?
I don't know.
Don't know.
He was really smart.
He was prescient. Yeah, okay,
He was intuitive.
yes. So, July 5 to 9, it's time to camp out for a few days on the Sweetwater River. That night, twin boys, Henry and Philip, were born to Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Neer, friends from Iowa. So, time for,
Yeah, they also had an 8-year-old daughter, so that made 3.
yeah, okay. So,
Yes, they had plenty of time to relax and restock. Margaret made lots of good use out of her cast iron stone kettles and
sheet iron stove and
sheet
Dutch
iron
oven,
stove,
and,
Dutch
yeah,
oven.
baking bread, doing laundry, all that kind
So
of
they
stuff.
stayed for a few days after the twins were born.
So those were the only babies born on this train that were noted by Margaret.
Yes.
About July 10 to 12, crossed the Continental Divide. We all know why that's important.
Because finally, at Pacific Springs at the Continental Divide, we found the first river that flowed west. That's a good sign.
Yeah. So at the end of July, they crossed the Green River and met Dr. and Jesse Holliday, brothers of Ben Holliday. So their mother had a wayside inn with a ferry crossing.
Yes, they noted at least 100 immigrants were camped waiting to cross on her ferry.
So sometime after that, probably October, maybe September, here's where it gets really, we don't know.
Yeah.
They reached Soda Springs and they had a great drink.
Yes. They noticed clean, clear water cascading over granite through the cataract. Some was hot water and some was cold water. So they had to be really careful with the horses and the kids. But what they did with that clean, crisp, clear water is they blended their store of lemons, tartaric acid with syrup and water and wild gooseberries for a very refreshing drink. Young Frank was fascinated by the puff puff of the Steamboat Springs. That would be so good. Don't go over there.
Yes, I can just see a little 2-year-old
Yeah,
going,
the hot
ah, wee. The one place you don't want him to go to. Okay, so again, October-ish, they reach Fort Hall where Oregon and California trails divide. So we come to decision time, even though they were thinking Oregon, but
They must have been all getting together or getting along because they let Captain Caples
yes, flip a chip.
flip a chip.
We're not talking poker chips.
No, I don't think it was a poker chip.
So
But they could go towards California or they could go to Oregon.
here's what happened.
Let's see which way the wind favors. There it goes. There's the chip.
Chip. Oregon!
Oregon!
You're funny.
We had a lot of fun doing this, might as well,
We can tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so October, 3 days after this momentous event, out of Fort Hall, they crossed the Snake River to Salmon Falls and had their first sight of Chinook salmon sold by Indians eager to sell. Unfortunately, the only life lost was here.
Yes, it was Grandma Caples' favorite cow. The cow ended up dying from eating grease, wood, brush.
Which I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Have we heard of grease, wood?
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, okay, well,
Oh,
that's
that's
more
good.
than-
That's
that's
better
more
than-
than we did. Okay, so about October and November. Now, I love how the counterposition of happy and sad emojis, or happy and angry, because this gives you a good idea of the Caples character, I think. So the first one is by the Birch Creek on the Snake River. A young man appeared lost from hunting and without food.
Yes, he left his party early that morning to go hunting, and he didn't realize that he traveled so far and got lost without any food or provisions. So that morning, he said, Captain Caples, I have no money, but I will gladly repay you in some manner. Captain Caples told him, we will feed you, and in remuneration, we ask is that if you meet another in the same predicament as you will relieve his need.
Yeah, now we just say pay it forward.
Pay it forward, but you will relieve
But
his
relieve
need.
his need. So then,
We're
not
quoting.
that much later, at the Powder River Slough, we meet our friend Hiram Smith.
Here's Hiram.
Here's Hiram, so whom they knew from Iowa. So Smith had piloted the Caples train through the Blue Mountains into the Grand Ronde Valley, and then the Smith brothers had a camp, and they butchered cattle and sold veggies and fresh beef to the immigrants at
Enormous prices. They were
McLaughlin-
opportunists.
Yes, good, yeah, big time. The McLaughlin family from the Caples train stayed behind with the Smiths. So then the Caples what?
Yeah, so with some coaxing, the Smith brothers talked Grandpa Caples into leaving behind 22 head of his stock to bring to the Dalles later that season. So, so later they heard a report stated this was after they went to the Dalles, and later on, the Caples agreed to leave. The report stated that the cattle had perished, but rather they heard later they were driven by a herd down to Rogue River. That is an appropriate destination for cattle thieves.
Yes, Rogue,
Rogue
aptly
River.
named.
The Caples didn't do any other investigations, they said.
So, got happy, and I just think that speaks to character. Okay, moving on to the Umatilla Agency, now Pendleton. A crowd of Indians that were fascinated with the large blue eyes and fair skin of the Caples' young son, Hal. So the chief offered Margaret.
So first of all, they were kind of surprised. They thought he was a girl because he was so pretty with blue eyes and fair hair and fair skin, but no, he was a little boy. The chief offered 50 ponies for trade, which Margaret coldly refused. Needless to say, there was no negotiations made.
But Captain Caples did trade. He bought some moccasins and seed corn. He's the first indication he's thinking about that land that's now almost reach out and touch really close.
Yes.
Exciting. So about November, they're in Deschutes to 10 Mile Creek near Mount Hood, the foot of Mount Hood. They decided to remain and stake the claim. So Captain Caples and another man went to the Dalles with a team and wagon to buy a plow, seed wheat, a barrel of pickled pork, say that 3 times fast, and other necessities. Returning to camp, what did they meet?
When they got back to the camp, they came across some squatters. These squatters refused to leave their land. So to avoid any further dispute, we just simply moved on to the Dalles. Okay, goodbye.
So in the Dalles, they met Miss Dr. McCurdy and wife, former friends from Weston, Missouri, and their wagons were all left in the Dalles due to prohibitive freight charges. Oh boy, money, money, money. Didn't have that problem in 1844. So by December, by flatboat, and remember flatboat, that becomes important down the road too, or down the river. They went down the Columbia from the Dalles to the Cascades. At the Cascades, they were met by
Joseph
F. Caples.
The guy that convinced him to go somehow got word. Now, I don't know how that happened.
Yes.
Got word they were coming and when they were coming, and took his kids and went to Cascade Locks, I'm thinking, and met his cousin Henry and his family.
Yeah. So.
And said, "Come on with me."
Yeah. Margaret says his glowing description of the lower Columbia Valley persuaded us to abandon our plan to settle in Portland. Instead, we headed to our 328-acre donation land claim known as Caples Landing, directly across from Dr. Caples' house in Columbia City, Oregon.
Joseph Caples, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Dr. Caples'
Yeah.
house. That was Joseph's son.
Yeah.
Trying to keep all the Caples.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot.
There's a lot. Okay, December 12th, 1852, end of the Oregon Trail for Caples. That brought them with brave hearts and willing hands and a trust in God.
Yeah.
That night, 2 feet of snow fell to welcome them, heralding the severe blizzard of 1852 to 53. Yeah. So, did you see that? Yeah. In 1852, Margaret Caples called the Columbia River
The trail's end,
the old trail's end, and the new west's beginning. Okay, so here we are at,
That's our DLC on the right, just below Martin's Island. You'll see there's Caples, she marked in red. And see how narrow the Columbia River is? Well, directly across is where Columbia City is. At a narrow portion, there's actually several of those plots that are all Caples. And so at one point they basically, when I read in a diary after they arrived here that the kids initially went to school, it was easier to just go by boat over to Columbia City than it was to go trekking over to Mr. Lewis's house over by the Lewis River.
well,
And up in his acreage,
Yes.
his home.
which I thought was funny because it took us 40 minutes from my house in Vancouver
Just
to go visit this museum in Columbia City. So
down around the same.
they should have kept the ferries in some
Some of
areas,
them,
you
yeah.
know? It's like a really cool thing.
They would go back and forth a lot. There was an article in the Columbian where the Indians came to attack on our property in Woodland. And so Grandpa Caples said he gathered as many homesteaders as he could nearby, like the Martins up on Martin Island, and saw that there was a danger of some Indians coming to attack, which they did. But since we had a boat, they were able to just go over to Joseph's property and watch until they were gone, and then they went back.
That's how close. So Joseph Caples' sons, Dr. Charles and Hezekiah Caples, actually owned and operated a stern wheeler called a Metlapo, which the picture is in the upper right there. This is really cool to find that. And they ran on a passenger and freight schedule. You can even imagine them going up and down the Columbia here. You know, if you really have a good imagination, you can probably
You can see the
yeah,
ferry,
you can probably imagine them going up there.
and then back to
And then
Caples.
maybe coming on a return trip and
Back to
landing at
Caples.
Caples. You know, so good imagination there. So yeah, Caples Landing was the embarkation point. Later, the Caples brothers owned and operated steam-powered, propeller-driven Victor, and the 3-foot diameter 4-blade propeller of the Victor is now at the Caples House Museum, which we didn't know at the time. I found this after, naturally.
We would
So
have
that was like, I would have wanted to get a picture of
See
that
that,
propeller. So anyway, but they're very well known as transportation field. So they also tried a railroad. And I just read in the Clark County latest annual of the Clark County Historical Museum, as well as an article written by Scott Hewitt in the Columbian about Greg Harrington's research about local would-be railroad builders. Well, they also had them in Cowlitz County.
Yeah, we did.
Let's build a railroad. I don't know what we're doing, but let's build one. Anyway.
We got a ferry, let's get a railroad going.
So they were gonna have it from Hillsboro to Caples Landing, which would have been great for those commuting to Hillsboro, but they didn't do that. And, but later Charles was involved with the Northern Pacific Railroad extension to Columbia City.
Yeah.
So explain what these wonderful pictures are.
Okay, so about 5 years ago, I had to go see for myself where this DLC was. And so my brother and I, my youngest brother and I went, and this is the top left picture. It's the Caples Extension Road that goes out to our property, which is that narrowest part of the Columbia River. Directly across is Dr. Charles Caples' home and museum.
And here's Caples Lane, so.
Yes, so that's Caples Extension, and there's Caples Road. They go like this. And then I got all excited because that was our land, so I wrote our name in it and put it in the sand. And that was around 2019, and my brother did the same thing. We got pictures of us on our Caples property. It's an unincorporated community now, but it's just 2.5 miles west, directly west of downtown Woodland. My cousin, Elwood Caples' granddaughter. I am in touch with her, especially now with this stuff. And I said, do you have any pictures for me? And so she sent me, Elwood's granddaughter sent me pictures of her cast iron things that she has from the original wagon train of 1852. And it's the cast iron muffin mold and our kettle that went on the wagon.
So here's our visit.
So Pepper and I decided on March 23rd we needed to go over to the Caples Museum for more inspiration, which we didn't need much more. But so we took it to, we showed up unannounced because they were open from 11 to 1 or something.
Yeah.
And we said, well, let's just go over at 11 and we'll just go to the museum and we'll just say who we are. Like, hi, I'm Cindy, I'm a Caples, she's my Caples cousin by marriage. And they welcomed us in. The groundskeepers, the caretakers were so wonderful. They were so excited.
Yeah.
They just treated us like royalty. Then I brought them, of course we brought them gifts. We brought them pictures of my family and stories.
We got information, so it's really a productive exchange of information they didn't have and information we didn't have.
We kind of confirmed some things they didn't know.
Yeah.
And they gave us lots of the grand tour. They opened all the rooms in the house for us, where sometimes you have to just look in and see. They go, we don't open this for just anybody. So we got a full tour of the house.
It was cool.
And it was beautiful.
It was 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, we were there for about 3 or 4 hours.
Well, explain what you're holding is. This is
So-
one of the doors.
So at the front door of the house of Dr. Caples, we said, what's that lever on the front, Senator? Does anybody have a guess? So, what's that?
Is it to knock?
Oh, that's close.
Close.
So the caretaker says, he goes, just turn it. And so I go like this and I start doing this and it goes,
Hey,
The doorbell.
it's a doorbell.
Doorbell.
So I started doing that. Pepper goes, do it again, I'll take a picture.
Yeah. So I thought it was a good entree to the Joseph, or to the Dr. Caples
Yes, let me in.
Museum. So here's the actual museum. It's open, it's actually run by the DAR since 1959, and they have a caretaker on land, so they're there all the time. But this is actually on the same land that Joseph Caples built his original log cabin. But Dr. Caples, Charles Caples, his oldest son, tore that down and built his own really magnificent house that's so many interesting things and original items, artifacts that they have inside. They actually also have a tea room, and they have weddings there, and like a really cheap wedding venue. So
Yeah,
I thought, wow.
it is.
Yeah, the next day I met somebody, I just first met them and their neighbors, and they just got engaged. I said, hey, I know a really great place. I don't
Here's
know,
a
it's just
brochure.
like, here, yeah, I just happen to have this brochure.
Where is the Caples Museum?
Columbia City, Oregon,
Yeah,
just
just further along the Columbia from
St. Helens.
Yeah, so that area. So it's 40 minutes.
But our property in Woodland looks directly across the river to this property.
Yeah, But if anybody wants to go, we'd be glad to go, maybe in a summer trip. If anybody wants to go, we can talk about that
It's
later.
super
'cause
fun.
it's really
I
interesting.
thought we had that plan.
No, that's
we've got
the end of the Oregon Trail, April
Oh,
30.
okay. The different.
Yeah,
They're
different
different.
museum. Okay, so this is Joseph and his wife, Mary Lawford Caples. That was in-
These portraits are, they've got them displayed in the hallway. So here's the stairwell that goes up to the upstairs bedrooms and kids' room and the master bedroom. And these are in the hall. And then the next picture will show you, they've got the original wallpaper in this house.
Yeah.
They found extra rolls upstairs in the attic, so they said, this must be original wallpaper.
Yeah.
It wasn't like somebody came in and redid it.
Yeah, and this is real sweet. It's pictures drawn by one of their two teenage daughters, either Joanna or Mary. Wasn't signed, but I thought that was sweet. And they have it displayed, but they should be facing each other. They look like they had an issue.
I was gonna, when they walked away, I was gonna switch it.
I was gonna too. Great minds. Okay, so.
Okay, so my father, Bud Runyan, Herbert Caples, had a cousin, Robert Caples Stevenson. That was his aunt's son. And Robert Caples got me very excited about looking into the Caples history of my dad's side of the family. So Cousin Caples is who he is. Cousin Caples, we ended up having a Caples reunion at the Charles Caples Museum one time. And I'm walking through the house and I see Dr. Charles Green Caples and my cousin Bob Caples. And I said, oh my gosh, they are distant relatives, but they had that same full head of white hair, the big full white beard. And I said, cousin Bob, come here. This is about 25 years ago, 20 years. I said, you've got to see this. Wow, he looks just like me. So we thought we better put that in there. It was kind of neat how that can carry on in that in so many different directions.
Right. So even though Dr. Charles Caples was only 12 on the trail, he is a bona fide 1844 pioneer. So he has this ribbon, and I mean, I recognize it right away. I remember, you know, the meetings they used to have in Shampooey for the pioneers. So they had those ribbons, so I recognize that right away. Does anybody else have pictures of their ancestors with those? Oh, that was like, oh yeah. So, okay, get ready for the cousin connection. So this is Minerva Bonser Caples. She married Joseph Caples' second son, Hezekiah, of the ferry boat fame. And so as soon as I saw that her maiden name was Bonser, I thought, oh my gosh, we have a connection. Because number one, the Bonsers settled on Silvies Island, which is where my ancestors settled. And I knew that my ancestors had married into the Bonser family because, you know, those island people. Anyway, so here's Minerva with this magnificent pump organ in the house. I just love that. It's such a beautiful.
This was in the Napa Center, which is one of the public rooms at the museum that you can rent.
Yeah.
That's where we had our
Big,
Caples
huge room,
reunion.
like a tea, it would be.
Yeah,
tea
there's a
room.
pump organ over there with
Yeah.
her picture. right
Yeah,
above
so
it.
we took that, but I took Minerva because I thought, okay. And some of you have seen my paper doll. I gave it to you. I don't know what we have it here.
No.
Okay, so the paper doll I did of Pioneer Polly was actually of Marianne Polly McQuinn, a third great aunt or something, the daughter of my Pioneer McQuinn ancestors, and she married a Bonser. So my paper doll, I gave her a copy, like my paper dolls after somebody that married in the same family.
Mhm.
You know, we're getting excited about. I love to find connections with people. It's like, you know, I moved to Washington thinking I had no connection because I grew up in Portland. It's like I have a ton of connections.
Yeah.
The more research I do, so that's one of the things is research more. You never know what you're going to find. So here's the connection.
She got it. She did a lot of
I
work
did
on this, you
an
guys,
inordinate amount of time to do this, but it was so much fun.
and figured out what
So,
her connection was. Go
Cindy's
ahead.
second cousin, 3 times removed. She is the second cousin, 3 times removed, of Hezekiah Caples, who married Minerva Jane Bonser. And Cindy's also first cousin, 4 times removed, of Joseph Caples. Minerva Bonser was the daughter of James Halstead Bonser, who was the son of John Bonser, who was the son of Isaac Bonser. I put that in red. There's the comment. My second great aunt, Mary Ann Polly McQuinn, who was born on Soviet Island, married Clinton Bonser, who was the son of Samuel Bonser, who was the son of Isaac Bonser. So, really quickly, you're gonna remember this. Cindy's second cousin, 3 times removed, is married to the niece of
Pepper's second great aunt, Mary Ann Polly McQuinn Bonser. She did it. She did all that
so
work.
we get to say
Cousins. Pioneer cousins. Pioneer.
Okay. So that Bonser, John Bonser, you heard that name enough. He's a really interesting character. First of all, this picture is just, it was too good not to put in. But he was also a riverboat captain, both in the Ohio, and then he turns out he was a pioneer riverboat captain on the Columbia, Cowlitz, and Lewis rivers. He was the first, here's his stern wheeler, the mascot down in the lower left.
That's an actual picture of his.
Yeah, and luckily my husband was 10 years at sea, and I said, do you know what wooding up? Because it says the stern wheeler.
Wooding.
I didn't know.
What, we go to him, what's wooding up?
What's wooding up? And he goes, it's gathering
Fuel.
firewood for
Fuel.
fuel. See, okay, see what I
Oh,
mean?
we didn't know
Yeah, well,
that.
I didn't know, you know, like, luckily he came in at the right time. So, and then John Bonser was the first pioneer to build and float a flatboat over the falls near the Dalles. The raft was made of tall timbers. Spelling mistake. Kill me. I've read this a gazillion times. Okay, with bushy treetops tied to the front to break the water and prevent sinking. He left the buck saws there for later wagon trains to use after building his rafts. How cool is that? So we know my family were practically starving the Dalles in 1844. 1847, Bonser comes along and gets this flatboat idea, and then Margaret mentions going by flatboat from the Dalles. So by the time in 1852, they had a much better deal going on than my family. So there's that connection. And of course, he's buried at the Old City Cemetery in Vancouver. I know this monument. I remember seeing Bonser there, but I never knew exactly who he was. You know, I just knew there's got to be a connection. It really stands out, like the Washington Monument.
So now we know that Bonser Monument represents.
Yeah, we have this connection, both of us. John Bonser. And I mean, you can never forget this guy. This is an interesting guy. Okay, so here we are at Pixie Park.
This is Pixie Park. So if you're up on the Caples Museum, Columbia City, Dr. Caples Museum land, looking towards my DLC, you're looking at Pixie Park, and we decided we needed a picture specifically of Pixie Park because you're looking at it. That's the park.
That's
Go
it.
ahead.
That's the park. Just these little timbers, but I mean, somebody had a really great sense of whimsy, and the plaque there. So that's why I made it bigger on this rock. Says it's the property of somebody who had a boat named the Pixie. I thought, what a cool, really original memorial to somebody. So it was adorable and great framing.
And then looking back the other direction away from Washington. Oh, this is still, okay.
Yeah.
Looking back,
He's getting it.
there's the Caples Museum house right there on the top in the middle. And this is from that little Pixie Park we just saw.
Yeah, so it's just
So it's
across
just
the
right
road,
there.
right by the river.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we come to Caples' descendants after the trail. The journey continues. So here's Henry Lawfer.
He's got quite a story. I wanted to say before we get started on him that I was wondering, did he go to school back in 40, but what happened was he got a job because his dad died when he was 11. So he got a job with a mercantile person in his town. He farmed, he went to school 3 months a year, he worked at this mercantile store, and he studied law with this guy that owned the store. So I think that's where he actually started his whole career of legislation and
Yeah, law and mercantile.
and mercantile
Goes back and forth with both at
and
the
farming
same time.
and
Very industrial.
oh, very
Yeah.
industrious.
Cindy, your dad looked like this guy.
I
That looks like
know.
pictures of your dad.
I know.
Yep,
Yeah.
looks just like him.
Yeah. Some people in Vancouver said, "Are you a Caples?"
Mhm.
And I go,
Looks like
they
your
go,
dad.
"It's like right here."
So he moved in and out around Vancouver, but he also went to a place called Pataha.
Pataha. That's where their youngest daughter lived.
Yeah.
That kind of rewrote the diary.
Yeah. And Betty, are you paying attention?
Betty.
Joe Woodland. So
Oh.
in 1871, he lived at. Isn't there a connection with you? And did I have that right?
Yeah, I lived right across from his homestead.
Yeah.
Louise
So-
knows.
but you- okay, so
Yeah.
Joe Wooden is a big name in Wooden Creek,
Wooden
Wooden Room, and the Battleground Community Center where we
Yep.
met.
Well,
So
yeah, Grandpa Caples bought 2 parcels of land at Battleground Lake. And while he was improving and building a home, he stayed at the Wooden House as a guest.
of his former
Isn't that
employee.
funny?
So I saw, as soon as I saw Wooden, because Betty, you did the report on the Wooden.
Yes, she did.
And I wouldn't have known that. Without, sorry, I can't resist a pun.
Corn.
Anyway. Anyway, so I have to just point, I was hoping you would be here today, so you can see that. So
Former employee.
his Caples' former employee, Joe
Joe
Wooden.
Wooden. So then when he went and bought the property out at Battleground, he stayed with him till he got his house built.
Yeah.
He was all over the place.
Yeah, deputy county clerk, deputy county auditor, police judge.
Anybody know what a police
Pat?
judge?
No, I have no idea what a police judge is.
Police judge handles misdemeanors.
Handles misdemeanors.
Okay.
Note to self.
Yeah, note to self.
We
Yeah,
thought it was a
911
typo.
Is that like drunk and rowdy on a Saturday night? Is that a misdemeanor?
That would be a police judge.
Yeah, I guess unless something worse happens to it.
Interesting.
Didn't know that. Okay, so.
This is just a couple of articles. Of course, they didn't provide us with what paper. I'm assuming back in the 1865, that Henry and John F. Caples were attorneys and counselors at law. So this law office was in Vancouver, and this was just an article about what they did, justices, probate, and district court.
Yeah.
And they did lots of preparation for DLCs, and they got involved in all that stuff. They were very attorney-like. And then there was an article, I'm gonna say probably the Columbian, but we don't know, about the Caples family. And pretty much, it mainly talks mostly about their history, and then also towards the end about Elwood, of course, and how he was involved with
Yeah.
Vancouver.
So just a reminder, because some of these articles, and I found it in my own research materials, people cut out clippings, which is great, but if you don't put a date and preferably like Columbian or whatever source, it makes it kind of frustrating. Like, but down the road, might not know. This one nicely has the Columbian newspaper, and I can't read it from here.
96?
96? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay.
So this one was about just, it does have Bonser's mentioned in there, and then this is where it describes Grandpa Caples gathering up all of the, with the other pioneers on the Washington side, along with his friend Indian Zach. And they all took off and headed over to Joseph Caples' property, and this is the article about that. incident,
Yeah.
the 56 Indian
Yeah.
War
Yeah.
in Lewisburg.
Yeah.
And that's written by Jim Carty.
Uh-huh.
Yes, yeah.
Does that article mention the one woman that was actually murdered by, it was a band of Indians, like
I
6
don't
or 8
know,
of
it
them.
was too
I
hard to
don't
read.
But they actually supposedly murdered a woman.
Oh,
I don't know,
oh.
yeah. We didn't have time to,
And here's Grandma Caples' obituary.
and,
This is my great-grandparents, Dad's parents. So they have a lot of history in Hawkinson and Brush Prairie and things. Maria was a seamstress, and I'll bet you anything she made that dress.
yeah.
And they were married in 1898 in Vancouver, Washington. And so that's the wedding picture.
Yeah. And they're buried in the Brush Prairie.
They had
Cemetery.
5 children. They had Charles William Jr. That's Uncle Charles. And then they had Anna Mae. And they had Ruth. And they had Uncle Philip. And then they had my grandfather, Herbert Lee. And he was the youngest.
Yeah, born in Hawkinson.
He was born in Hawkinson in 1912. And he died in 34. So he was 22.
Married Mildred Erickson.
My grandma Mildred, who soon became Grandma Runyan, right?
Yeah. So there's Mildred.
Yeah, there's their wedding announcement in the Columbian, and it's really cute. It says, a very famous singer on the radio in Portland is marrying a farm boy from Hawkinson. And in her wedding, and they described who was the pastor, it was really cute, but she carried a bouquet of forget-me-nots and a beautiful satin wedding dress. And she married a farm boy from Hawkinson.
But she was a singer. And
Yeah, she was a
on
very
radio
famous singer.
show from Woodland.
On the radio in Portland, yeah.
Yeah.
So she was very famous, he wasn't.
Cindy, and you know there is a Caples Road.
Yes,
Yeah.
There's two Caples Roads, there's
Yeah.
one in Vancouver and one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yes, they are very connected.
Yes.
They had 10 kids, so.
Yeah.
And then my great-grandpa had 5, so 10, 15.
Okay.
Okay, so this is my great-grandfather top left is Charles William Caples. He's the one in the wedding picture. And the middle one is Douglas Caples. That's Douglas Elwood Caples' dad. And that's Philip Caples on the far right. And then we have Margaret and Henry in the middle. And then two of their daughters, Rosa Caples. And Rosa Caples on the left bottom, I think she's the one where they would go to Pataha, Washington, Eastern Washington, and visit. Eventually they stayed there.
Yeah.
But she's the one that rewrote the diary, I think, for Elwood. It says to Elwood Caples, from her. So I think she was the one that basically took the original diary and then did it for us.
Yeah. But the
And Lillian.
The Oregon Historical Society has a copy of this diary too, so. And then Lillian. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
This house is located to what's now the Elks Building on 9th and Main. So here's the Elks Building on the corner where Runyon's used to be back in the 60s. And then here's the Tomlinson Building right next to it. And they lived there just for a short time, probably around 1868. And so that's, of course, great-grandpa and Anna Marie Caples. And anyway, that we don't have names or anything on the
Yeah.
darn picture. But anyway, they stayed at the Tomlin house for a while. This is our Hawkinson farm. I don't know where it is. It references on the road to Sifton, but that doesn't help me at all. So we've looked up in genealogy and the land stuff, and even Gene Ritter is trying to figure out where our farm was. But so we're still researching.
Yes, the old
We are
researching.
still
Yes,
researching.
that's our theme.
So On the front porch is a buggy, and inside that would be Philip,
Yeah,
the one that was on the right of Douglas. In the back row, they listed on the back of the picture, praise the Lord, Mr. Stegeman, Anna Marie Caples, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, Charles William Caples Sr., Mr. Loomis, Charles William Caples Jr., and also Bob Taylor. In the front are Dad's aunts, Ruth Caples and Anna Mae, Herbert's sisters.
so,
These are in the Old City Cemetery. I took pictures not too long ago just of the Caples there. And it's on the southeast corner, so it's kind of when it started, I think.
yeah, it's like 2 blocks from my house.
Yeah,
So Henry and Margaret here, and then other
yeah.
indirect Caples relatives.
Yeah, Robert Francis Caples was
Yeah.
a brother, I think.
So there's many, many prominent Caples descendants. A lot of you know of them. Pat Gelada certainly knew.
We
he
enjoyed
always
your-
love learning that.
Yes.
So, but we didn't, have room or time to do all of them, but we did highlight D. Elwood because that was fascinating. I think that the main thing I want to point out is that as first chairman of the Vancouver Housing Authority Board, and he served for 35 years, and that group was involved in a huge wartime expansion of Vancouver housing and later active in urban renewal in downtown area redevelopment of McLaughlin Heights. So, but he was many, many other things, very involved and really an amazing person.
What's his name again?
Elwood Caples.
Yeah.
Knew him
D.L.
well.
Okay.
Douglas Elwood Caples. You knew him well, Margaret?
Yes, I knew Elwood Caples.
Yeah,
Good.
okay, cool.
Don't you think they made up the name Elwood back in the early 1800s?
Could be,
Yeah.
like a character.
Yes.
I don't know.
I'll have to check in, get back to you with his granddaughter.
Yeah. So then Elwood had a sister, Garnet Phyllis Caples Allen. Also, accomplished career teacher in Clark County, 45 years, trustee of Western Washington College of Education, Memorial Hospital, Vancouver Siemens Center. And it says here, president of Clark County Daughters of the Pioneers. I copied that, and okay, people, did the chapter 19 Fort Vancouver Daughters of the Pioneers have a former name, or is this a different?
Is this a typo? It's just supposed to be chapter 19.
Or they didn't know, whoever was writing the article didn't know
Yeah.
our full formal name.
I'd say they just probably.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah,
Right, so that's why the question mark.
Do you think-
But this is the group to ask.
we didn't get
And
renamed.
I've never seen it as Clark County. I've only seen it as Daughters of the Pioneers,
Pioneers.
chapter 19.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
perfect.
So we have it on authority.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then William Caples, D. Elwood's son, was a lawyer and in Vancouver and other places in Washington.
And then you can introduce us to the next one.
Barbara Caples?
Yes,
His sister.
yes, his sister.
She graduated the same year that I did from
Yes.
Vancouver High School. And Barbara Caples was the editor of our Alki that year.
Oh,
And Barbara and I went to school from the 7th grade through the 12th.
Wow.
fascinating.
Okay, cool.
Right.
And you were good friends. You got invited to the Caples house.
Yes, I had dinner there more than once.
So did Pat Gelada. She had dinner with Elwood Caples.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I would like to shake hands with Gelada.
Well,
She's
she's
right
right there.
She's right here.
No, I was asking that we go around with the names.
Well, I think
we're
we
gonna do it at the
should.
meeting, but for those of you who don't know, Pat Gelada has kindly accepted Cindy's offer to come watch our presentation. And
That's
Pat
great.
Gelada's name is Clark County History. That's her middle
That's
name.
right.
I mean, if you haven't heard of her, you should.
I'm so happy you wanted to come.
And Cindy and I went to an amazing presentation about how Vancouver became
Almost
Vancouver. It was
missed the boat.
so excellent.
It was.
But I'm
Really?
the eldest.
Yeah,
Very well
Margaret's our eldest emeritus
Definitely that
member-
amounts to something.
Yeah.
She's the most
That counts as
honorary.
seven? Yeah. Okay, so here's
Okay, on the left is Herbert Caples.
your dad.
This was my grandfather, Herbert Caples, and my grandmother, Mildred Erickson Caples. They were married and had my dad.
This is Mildred again. You can see her.
Yeah,
It's a very distinctive look in the middle.
yeah, this is at the farm in Hawkinson before they got married and had my dad. And then to the right is his sisters, left and right, and my grandma's in the middle.
Wasn't Mildred widowed?
My grandma was widowed and she married Grandpa Runyan.
That's what
Yeah.
That's right, she
Yeah.
did.
That's important.
It
Yes.
is.
I found out when Garnet was the president in 1989 and 1991.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
Garnet Allen.
Garnet Allen.
Yeah,
And
Allen.
she taught at Philida Elementary School, and she was my husband Zane Miller's teacher
Oh my goodness.
at
See, I know that.
Philida Elementary School.
While Zane was
Great-
buddies
great
with my
school.
dad.
I know, and my husband was buddies with Buddy.
With buddies with buddy.
Buddy with buddy.
They went to school together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
That's
talk
neat.
about-
It was a kind of a small town.
Yeah.
Yeah, she followed Margaret Culpepper.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
okay, yeah.
Wow.
So,
So that was her era.
so talking about Buddy.
Yeah. So my parents got married at St. Paul's Lutheran Church on Franklin Street in 1952. And of course they dated prior to that. Dad lived on this side of the Vancouver Memorial Hospital. Mom lived on this side. And so on the way on their first date, he stopped and stole a yellow rose out of someone's yard and gave it to my mom. So now yellow roses represent my dad. Like for Easter, Mom got a yellow rose. They dated since they were about 14 or 15, and then they got married in 52, 10 years later. And then in 1960, this is them as a mazama on top of Mount Hood 6 months after,
The top picture.
yeah,
Yeah.
6 months after Mom had my twin brothers.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a mazama for you.
Yeah. And last year was in Covington.
Oh, I had a anniversary party for my parents last year. It was their 70th
In the Covington
at
house.
the Covington
And
house.
you forgot to call me, so I didn't get to go.
Yes.
I would have gone if I didn't.
Yeah.
I would have gone.
So,
And this is our family. About 5 years ago, we were down in Long Beach, Washington, getting crab and having family reunion. But anyway, we had a group photo, and the left is James Caples Runyan. That's one of my twin brothers. There's me, there's David the youngest. There's Jeanette Caples, my sister, and the other twin, Gerald Allen Caples, or Allen Runyan. And there's my nephew.
Parents in the front.
yeah,
That's great.
that's great.
Wonderful picture.
And
Just-
this is just my ancestry. Mom's family was from the very, very northernmost point of Norway. And Dad's was from central Sweden. So therefore I'm 45% Swedish and 39% Norwegian, and the rest is Caples. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, so here's just the rundown.
Yeah. There's the family
There's
tree.
all of them together, starting with Henry Laufer, second great grandparents, first great grandparents, grandparents, parents, Cindy. And,
You did a fine job. Well, here we go.
yeah, so the end of a 7-month trip, which had brought them
With brave hearts and willing hands
and
a
trust in God
to the golden Oregon country.
The end.